Welcome to Reliability Matters, a podcast for the electronic assembly industry. Each episode covers topics related to reliability, best practices, and environmentally responsible assembly techniques, with insights from experts across the electronic assembly industry. Now, here's your host, Mike Conrad.
Welcome back to another episode of the Reliability Matters podcast. SMTA is well known for producing high-quality, relevant technical conferences and symposiums. This includes, among others, the technical conference held at the SMTAI, Surface Mount Technology International Show, the High Reliability Cleaning and Coating Conference, the Symposium on Counterfeit Parts and Materials, the Advanced Electronics Assembly Conference, the Wafer-Level Packaging Symposium, the Electronics and Harsh Environments Conference, and perhaps one of my favorites, the Pan-Pacific Microelectronics Symposium, often referred to as PanPac. PanPac is unique in many ways, beginning with its venue. PanPac is held annually on one of the Hawaiian Islands. This fact alone makes a symposium stand out, but there are many other factors that make this symposium unique. Let me quote from PanPac's steering committee. The PanPac Microelectronics Symposium strives to build bridges and nurture relationships across all boundaries, oceans and cultures, industries and technologies, companies and individuals. Its location in Hawaii always provides the requisite isolation from day-to-day distractions necessary to support these goals and enhance personal face-to-face interactions. The Pan-Pacific continues its mission of building the vision and future directions for the electronics industry. PanPac 2023 is scheduled for January 30th through February 2nd, 2023, at the Sheraton Kauai Resort on the beautiful Garden Island of Kauai. Well, I love attending pretty much all technical conferences and symposiums just for the educational opportunity. With PanPac, there's just something special about this conference. While all conferences provide an element of networking, I've forged many new relationships, friendships, and collaborative agreements with fellow attendees and speakers at Pan-Pacific. Perhaps it has something to do with being on a tropical island for a few days with like-minded people. To talk more about the upcoming Pan-Pacific Microelectronics Symposium, PanPac, I invited two colleagues who were instrumental in curating the technical content for this symposium. Dr. Chuck Bauer, one of the original creators of this symposium, and Keith Bryant joined me to discuss the conference technical tracks and presentations, as well as their view on what makes this conference unique. Gentlemen, Chuck Bauer, Keith Bryant, thanks for being my guests today on the Reliability Matters podcast. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Mike.
And I see at least two of the three of our guests got the memo. Dress accordingly. I did not do that, but I'm the Johnny Cash. I'm the man in black. You're the tropical guys here with your Hawaiian shirts on. For those of you who are listening to this podcast, not watching the podcast on our YouTube channel, both Chuck Bauer and Keith Bryant are in their Hawaiian shirts, getting the vibe ready for the upcoming PanPac Symposium. Chuck, you were, I believe, either the creator or one of the creators. You can clarify which one of PanPac. Tell me how you got involved in that, where this inspiration came from, and a little bit of the history of this particular symposium.
All right. Well, I'll try to keep it fairly brief, Mike. When I first began my own consulting practice, I focused on Asia a great deal, in particular Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, and Singapore. And at that time, it was obvious that we really didn't have a convenient location for those people to join with those of us from North America to meet for a conference. And I was on the board of directors of SMTA, and I had been on the board of the IMAPS, which at that time had become ISHM. I was the technical vice president in the early 90s. And so I approached 4 groups. I approached SMTA, IMAP, SEMI, the semiconductor industry group, and the ESR, the manufacturers rep organization. And what we ended up with is a cooperation between SEMI, IMAPS, and SMTA to create the Pan Pacific. We actually had the first organizational meeting in the basement of my home in Denver, Colorado.
Well, the venue has improved since then.
That very definitely, but we had a great meeting, and all 3 groups decided to cooperate and collaborate in establishing the event. And as a result, we had our first event on Waikiki at the Hilton Waikiloa Village. Actually, that's not correct. The Hilton Waikiki, and that was the beginning, the first year, and we've had a pretty good run since. That was 1996, I believe, was the first one.
And history repeated itself because we were back on near Waikiki just earlier this year. As we record
That's correct.
this is kind of the end of October of 2023, and in January of earlier this year, we were on Oahu, kind of visiting our roots, I guess. Keith, how did you get involved in this unique symposium?
Well, through the SMTA, I was lucky enough to be invited to speak, and I have to say I've been every year since. It is a completely unique environment. You make networking connections that I travel around the world speaking the same as you do, Mike, and I mean, a lot of the people at PanPac, you only see them at PanPac. And a lot of them are at a different level. I mean, you've got the CEO of Indium, you've got a lot of other very high level people who don't normally come to conferences, but they value the technical content that comes out of PanPac, and that's the real difference.
Yeah, I noticed that, I love conferences. I'm a conference geek anyway. And I noticed that when I go to like typical conferences, there's a lot of people off the production floor. There's a lot of engineers, clearly. What you don't see a lot of are C-level executives, particularly in sessions. They might be on the floor, maybe, but they're not generally in the tech sessions. PanPac is a little bit different. It's a mixture of influential engineers and C-level executives, which makes it quite unique. It's a different audience when you speak at PanPac as a speaker, as we've all done. It is a different audience. It's not your typical problem solution, although there is plenty of problem solution there. Sometimes it's a little higher up. It's a higher octave than what I would typically get used to at a quote unquote regular conference. It's a different vibe than the past. Not just, and we'll get into this as we talk a little bit more, but there are 2 interesting things to me that make Pan Pacific unique. One is the actual technical tracks and the presentations that are given all are a little off the beaten path in terms of, as I said, not just strictly problem solution, not like super geeky necessarily, a little bit higher octave, as I mentioned. And also the networking is different. We network at every trade show, at every conference, at every symposium. This is different, and it's hard to quantify that. We'll try and quantify that as we talk today. But it's a different level of networking. I have forged kind of deeper relationships as a result of PanPac than I would have at another conference, or at least on a faster track than I would have at other conferences. What do you guys think is the reason for that? What makes this event I hate to use the word special because it sounds a bit Disney-esque, but what it is somewhat special in a lot of ways. What do you think contributes to that?
I I would like to perhaps share a little bit of the perspective of the philosophy behind the conference. And this is both a personal philosophy and a philosophy that I find shared by many people in our industry. And that is that in general, we do business with people we know and trust. And the way you get to know and trust people is by spending time with them. The Pan Pacific provides an opportunity where, one, and not to sound too exclusive, but it's not easy to get approval to come to Hawaii. And consequently, everybody who gets there, regardless of their level in the organization, everybody who comes to Hawaii for the Pan Pacific is influential, because if they don't have influence, they can't get there. Secondly, there are no customers, there's no customer base in Hawaii. So when you come to the conference in Hawaii, you don't come to the conference, present your paper, hand out a few business cards, and go visit customers. You're there to sit down and meet with people. And the opportunity to sit and meet with people is pervasive. Breakfast, lunch, cocktail hour, dinner, throughout the day, whether it's in the meeting rooms, in the hallway, or maybe even at the pool. But people spend time together. And I think that speaks to your relationship building that you were talking about, Mike, that the reason you build those deeper relationships and build them faster is because you spend more significant time with those people. So that's, I think, the biggest impact. And then the second thing is that the second basic philosophy of the conference, besides the networking, is that we are really trying to build connections. I usually use the term bridges across the oceans. If you look at the history of the Pan Pacific, over its entire 27-year history, the general trend has been about 30% from Asia, 30% from Europe, and 40% from North America. Now, in recent years, North America has been a little stronger, primarily because of some of the issues with travel and some of the economic issues that have impacted us in, say 2008, 9, and then the COVID pandemic and that sort of thing. But realistically, we've had a good balance from all the continents. And when we started the event, we didn't expect to have that much participation from Europe. So I think that those philosophies of doing business with people you know and trust and building bridges across the oceans, those are the two fundamental underpinnings of the conference. And consequently, the technical content is very high level, it's very visionary, very broad-based. And later in our discussions, I'll talk a little bit about some of the events, the technical topics that have been covered, the events that have spun out of the Pan Pacific, and some of the high-level keynotes that we've had over the years. But for the moment, I'd like to pass it off to Keith and let him share his perspective as well.
Keith, as a European who travels all the way to Hawaii every year, you certainly bring the conference a unique perspective. Share your history of your participation in this event.
Well, my history doesn't go back as far as Jack, but as I said, I was lucky enough to be asked to speak and have managed to get there ever since. And yeah, it is a completely different conference. I mean, I'm just looking at the list of our speakers now. I'll come on to our keynotes a bit later, but we have people speaking from Dartmouth, we have people speaking from Hanover University, from the Fraunhofer in Munich, from Auburn University, Fraunhofer in Berlin, University of Texas, Institute for Factory Automation and Production System, University of Nuremberg, another Fraunhofer speaker from EMFT, And when you go to your, let's say, your normal conference, with respect, there are some technical papers and there are some please buy my machine papers.
Yeah.
We don't have that at PanPac. I mean, SMTA is generally pretty good at weeding out the commercial stuff anyway. But, we have speakers from universities talking to us about a whole load of stuff that, I mean, they say every day is a school day. And I mean, every PanPac is a learning experience for me. We've got the twin paradox explained. We've got, let's have a look, review about advanced LED packaging, AI and intelligent transportation, perception versus reality. We even just from the titles of these things, gallium, a versatile metal with many possible applications. Advanced packaging technologies, key enablers for electronic systems, is one of our keynotes, who's coming from the Fraunhofer in Berlin. So, we have really clever people coming from all around the world to tell us stuff.
And speaking of clever people, Keith, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm having a hard time keeping this contained, because I think this is the most exciting thing about this year's or next year's PanPac.
Yes.
You have a very clever person keynoting this year. Let's do a drum roll.
So I'll let you use his name, but I would just tell our audience that this guy is, we say icon and legend in his lifetime far too easily. But if I tell you that every one of you has in your pocket or on your desk something that this man actually, one thing that this man actually invented, I'd give you a few seconds to see if any of you could think what it is. But then I'll pass over to Mike, and he can tell you a little bit more about this gentleman, because he's actually had the pleasure of interviewing him, and that may well have come from the fact that he's been to PanPac also as a keynote in the past. But over to you, Mike.
And just to add a little bit more mystery before we solve this riddle, he's the only speaker, I think I can say this with a great deal of confidence, he's the only speaker in the entire electronics assembly industry that has won an Emmy for his contributions to the visual entertainment world. And that would be Dr. Eric Fossum, the inventor of, I'll say the technical term, and then we'll say the layman term for everyone else. He's the inventor of the CMOS image sensor, which we all know as the modern digital camera. So he's the reason why we have devices like this that take such wonderful photographs. He's the reason why there is an Instagram and a Facebook, and his technology changed not just the way we take pictures, obviously, it changed our culture, and it changed the way we communicate, and it changed the way we record everything. It changed the way we are talking right now, because I am staring into an image sensor, a CMOS image sensor, at this very moment, as is Chuck, as is Keith, as are all of you who are watching the show. You have a camera in front of you so that you could do the same thing. So I remember I watched him speaking several years ago at PanPac, and we broke for lunch. And one of the unique things about PanPac is there's no other place to go. You're not going to go out and go into Las Vegas and get lost in the casinos, or into the gas lamp district in San Diego, at another show. You're in this beautiful resort. You're having lunch and dinner and breakfast with everybody, all the speakers, the organizers, the attendees are all together. And I happen to be just randomly sitting at the table with Eric Fossum. And several other people. And I'm not a Hollywood. I live in in Los Angeles. We see celebrities fairly often. I don't get all crazy over celebrities, but I do get crazy over tech people, right? If I saw Steve Jobs over there, in his day, or Bill Gates over there, I would feel like giddy, and I was feeling giddy. It's like I didn't even know this guy. Had no idea, until I saw him speak at PanPac, and so I said to him, and I said, I know I'm going to sound just like totally geeky, and I apologize, but I just got to tell you how cool it is to sit next to someone who invented something where there's probably 100 of those inventions in this room, just right here. And one thing led to another, and I had recently launched Reliability Matters podcast, and I thought, well, wouldn't he be a great guest? And I invited him, and much to my surprise, he agreed to be my guest, and it's by far our number one downloaded episode, because it's just an interesting story. And if I can, I'll tell you the funniest thing. When I interview a lot of very smart people, a lot of scientists, a lot of PhDs, a lot of engineers, and who are subject matter experts, and sometimes the personalities can be a little bit dry, and a good host kind of gets personality out, and you try and you try and get a good laugh, because it should be entertaining as well as informative. And at first, my perception at first was Eric was very serious, right, and more typical of a personality of someone of that stature. And so I asked him early in the interview. I said, Eric, let's get honest here. Do you ever wake up some like random Sunday morning, just put your hands behind your head and say, damn, I invented that? And he just smiled and he goes, yeah, I do. And then he told me this story. He said, one time he and his wife were on holiday in Europe, and there was a bunch of girls taking a selfie, and he photobombed them. And they're like, who are you? Why did you photobomb us? And he handed him his card, and he said, look me up. And then like 2 weeks later, he gets this email like, OMG, you're the inventor of the camera phone, and it turned out he had a pretty funny, charming personality, behind the knowledge. There was a funny guy there, very human. But I'm looking forward to hearing him speak. His story of his journey to come up with a better technology than the CCD chip that was being used at the time was amazing. And the fact that he put an entire industry pretty much out of business, Kodak, and a film to a great degree, was amazing. And I think the stories he's going to tell of his journey to push this technology that no one really knew they needed, because we had a technology that was working. Turned out it wasn't working that well, and it couldn't have been scaled the way he did. But it's a very interesting, from a business standpoint, it's a very interesting story. From a tech standpoint, it's even a greater level of interest. And from a personality standpoint, what he's done with his career, now a professor at Dartmouth, is amazing. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Important.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point out that Eric is just one of many fabulous keynotes that we've had over the years.
Chuck, tell me about the another invention that was.
We've had several really world leaders who have developed tremendous technologies. One of our early keynotes in the 96 or 97 was Tsuyoshi Kawanishi, who's considered the godfather of the semiconductor industry in Japan. And at his keynote at the Pan Pacific, he disclosed Toshiba's development of the DVD. So the Pan-Pacific was essentially the announcement of the DVD technology that was developed at Toshiba. We also have had other notable speakers, such as Seiichi Denda, who was a director of Konica, and he shared with the audience a lot of concepts about communicating across cultural boundaries, and that was his keynote, teaching us how to understand that the use of words and humor and language is very different in different cultures, and how to actually be aware of those differences. We also had a professor, Dr. Herbert Reichel, who basically unified the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany and pulled all 7 different Fraunhofers together and led that organization for more than 2 decades. We also had John Quackenbush, who was instrumental in the definition of the human genome. And he shared with us the importance of genetics in terms of disease treatment. For example, if 2 of us have the same disease, a drug that works on me might not work on you, and a drug that works on you might not work on me, and we can know that ahead of time due to genetics. We've also had speakers such as Shenli Fu who was the founder of Isho University in Taiwan, and he led that university for 25 years before he retired. So we've had speakers from all over the world, keynote speakers. Rao Tumala from Georgia Tech and IBM fame, who has shared his vision of the future of packaging technologies. So we've had many, many very, very influential and very important speakers throughout the years at our conference. I think that one more point that I would make is that the SMTA even has 3 conferences that spun out of the Pan-Pacific Conference. And those are the Chip Scale Conference, which is now called the Wafer-Level Packaging Conference in the Bay Area, the Counterfeit Components Conference held at University of Maryland, and the High Reliability Conference held in Amsterdam. All 3 of those conferences spun out of tracks that were presented at the Pan-Pacific. More recently, we've had tracks on quantum computing last year, and a couple of years ago, we had a track on automated vehicles, and we're having a track. We had a session this year, and we're having a track on machine learning and artificial intelligence this year.
Yeah, very, very
so
topical.
As you can see, the topical coverage of the Pan-Pacific, it ranges far beyond just assembly and manufacturing technology, and really provides a roadmap to the future of our industry as a whole, not just the manufacturing industry.
Yeah, and for those who might be concerned they're going to get overwhelmed with engineering and tech, there's some really good sessions of last year, or a few years ago, whatever it was. We had the person who ran the observatory on the island talk about some of the things they found and observed, and what it was like running the observatory. We had an epidemiologist talk about viruses, in the wake of pandemics, and how viruses spread and how we track them, which was very topical and super interesting. We had, I think was it this year or perhaps the year before? We had the PR person from the Navy talk about the history of Pearl Harbor, and things that truly I did not know, and I'm a history buff. And so there is a lot of learning in addition to the challenges of our industry from a tech standpoint. There's a lot to learn about business, direction, and some of these aside things that aren't technically tech, but are extremely interesting. So it's a very well-rounded. It's got not just depth, it's got breadth to it as well, which I find very interesting.
Mike, I'd like to interject one more point on your list there. We also had a speaker about 5 years ago who shared with us the conversion of the entire island of Kauai to solar power with a battery storage. And yeah, I mean, that was a local guy telling us all about how Kauai had gone completely solar and they were storing everything in batteries. Now, he also told us why it failed. But we learned a lot
which
of
we can
lessons
learn,
from that.
right? Because what are we doing now? Now we're producing solar energy and storing them in batteries, right? That's kind of the way our grid is going to be working in the future as we move more towards sustainable. So yeah, we can learn from failure, we can learn from success, and any of that presented in this context is valuable. What I really enjoy, as I said earlier, is the fact that it's not just a 30-minute tech session or a 1-hour keynote. It's 4 days, 3 or 4 days of rubbing shoulders and interacting with the presenter. They don't just, generally speaking, they don't just get on a bus and head back to the airport as they would at other conferences. They're there, and part of it is it's a bit of an effort to get to the Hawaiian Islands for pretty much anybody. I live in California. I'm probably the closest, to there, and it's still 6 hours. So it's a bit of an effort, and it's a great destination. So people tend to stay the entire time, even longer. So that kind of guarantees that you're going to be able to spend more quality time. So you're not just hearing a pre-planned presentation. Once it's over, there's an awful lot of Q&A and exchange and over dinner, over lunch, over breakfast, as I'd mentioned earlier. And to your point, Chuck, about all the different types of presentations that have been given, the executive director of SMTA, Tanya Martin, told me that she's kind of coined, I don't know if she coined it or if she's repeating the phrase, but she likes to refer to PanPac as the conference of interesting things, because it's not just a counterfeit conference. It's not just a harsh environment conference. It's not a avoiding conference. It's so many different things, and very suitable for people who are running companies or as you said earlier, Chuck, have influence enough to be able to get their director to sign off on a conference in Hawaii. They have to have some degree of influence, and they take that influence back, and it can change the direction of a company. It can change the thought process of a company. It really is. It plants a lot of seeds at this. I think a lot of seeds are planted at this conference. That's why I enjoy it so much. And I know we're kind of all cheerleading for this conference here, but it is quite unique, and you don't really get it until you get it. You don't get it until you go. I've heard about this conference for years, and I'm just like, I'm not going to go all the way to Hawaii. That sounds like a boondoggle. That was in my head. And then I was invited to speak one year, and I went, and I was like, oh my God, this is not what I thought. This is a legitimate, real conference that is interesting. And the more times I went, the more I kind of fell in love with the whole concept of this conference. It's refreshingly different than a typical conference. Not that there's anything wrong with a typical conference, but it's just different. And you couldn't duplicate that in Anaheim or in San Diego or in Chicago or in Minneapolis or wherever. It has to be.
To reiterate that,
there.
Mike,
you couldn't.
To reiterate your point there, one of the most how do I say this? One of the most critical commentators in our industry was a gentleman by the name of Jack Baldy. Wonderful man, a bit cantankerous at times, but very, very spot on in terms of his observations around events and topics. And if you tried to pull the wool over the audience's eyes, he would make sure everybody knew it. And he came to the PanPac about 4 years before he passed, and he never missed one from then on. He came to the PanPac after constantly telling me for 10 years that he didn't think it made sense, that it was a boondoggle. And he finally came, and he never missed another one. He said, "This is an incredible event." And the same thing happened with Rao Tumola. The first time he came about 18 years ago, he walked up to me at the end of the conference and he said, "Chuck, this is an incredible event." He says, you should be very proud because it's mostly your friends." And I said, "Thank you, Rao." And Rao's been at the conference every year since then as well. So there are people who have been very skeptical over the years, but once they come and see the quality of the presentations and the quality of the networking opportunity, they become big fans.
Yeah. As that was my journey, and I think that was Keith's journey as well. Keith, you're
sure.
speaking at this upcoming conference?
Sorry, was that a question to me or Chuck?
Oh, sorry, Keith, are you speaking at this upcoming conference?
Yes, I'm hoping to.
And what are you hoping to speak on?
I'm working with a client with, let's say, revolutionary X-ray technology. And hopefully by then we'll be at a level where we have a lot of data and a lot of results and a lot of images to present. And, that's the ideal audience for that kind of a topic. So
I'm always
yes.
jealous of your presentations because you've been in the X-ray business. You're an X-ray expert. You've been in there for years, and you have the coolest slides because you have technology that can see through things. When you're in the cleaning business, as I am, no slides are cool, right? What does a clean circuit board look like, right? It just looks like a clean circuit board.
Yeah.
You get to show pictures.
You got to show messy circuit boards too, though.
Well, yeah, we show the contrast, but there's nothing cooler than being able to see through things. It's like that's like a superhero, talent right there, to see through things. So you always have the best presentations.
I have to say, it's a technology I've been involved with for a lot of years, and it does. It makes really good and really interesting images. If we get outside of electronics, the pictures of what was inside some of the early iPhones were sort of shattering for people because they were expecting it to be full of wonder and excitement, and basically, it was when you looked at it in real life, it was fairly straightforward. But,
that's right. Yeah.
It also shows you faults that you can't see with anything else, which is the exciting thing that I enjoy. But hopefully I'm going to be I'm pretty sure I'm going to be there, and hopefully I'm going to be presenting because
I'll look forward to it.
The first year I've missed for quite a few.
Well, we hope not to miss you.
I think that one of the most important messages to get across, Mike, is, if you come to the Pan Pacific, you learn a lot. You learn about the future. You meet a lot of very interesting people, and you leave a better person.
I concur. I think that's a great way to sum up the Conference of Interesting Things, Pan Pacific Microelectronics Symposium. Anything else before we go our separate ways and get our fake tans ready so that we look like we belong in Hawaii? Any other parting comments before we wrap this up?
Well, I guess you could talk about the golf or the cigars.
That is true. We do have kind of an unofficial cigar lounge that we just prop up from time to time for those of us who enjoy a good cigar. I know, Chuck, you do. And I think, Keith, you've joined us with bourbon, of course. In fact, we had at the last conference, we had someone would bring the bourbon, someone would bring the humidor, filled with cigars, and we would find a place where we didn't annoy people and it was safe, and we got that going on. And it's funny because as the nights went on, the group got bigger and bigger and bigger. It was almost like a conference within a conference, right? And the whole time we're smoking cigars and drinking bourbon or whatever, and talking about the a lot of the stuff we'd heard earlier that day. It just went on and on and on. It was great. That's just part of the unique culture of this event is you're not just taking one for the team. It's truly enjoyable and fruitful, beneficial. One quick anecdote. When I was at PanPac several years ago, I was in line. It rained, and a lot of everything in Hawaii, even the restaurants and the hotel lobbies, they're generally semi-indoor, semi-outdoor, right? And it was raining one morning, so half the restaurant was open air and half of it was covered. So there was a longer line than normal to get for breakfast because half the restaurant was not being used because it was raining. So I was like second in line, and I turned over my shoulder and looked behind me, and the line was considerably longer, probably about a 30-minute wait. And I noticed someone I knew from our industry, Dr. Ron Lasky, from Dartmouth and Indium Corporation. He was way back there, and I've met him a couple of times. We don't really know each other, but I knew of him. So I asked the person to hold my place in line, and I ran back and I said, Ron, are you by yourself? He goes, yeah. I said, well, so am I. Why don't you come up and join me? Because I'm about to be seated. He goes, oh, great. So in the 30 or 45 minutes we were having breakfast, we had, what do you do? Who do you work for? How'd you get in this industry? Blah, 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 blah. And he asked me the story of how I founded a company and from my garage to, where we are now. And he looked at me and goes, you got to come to Dartmouth and you got to speak to my students. And I'm like, I'd love to. I love telling that story. And I love nothing more than speaking with students. So I've done that now every year for several years. It's become a tradition that I go out and I speak to his graduating students, his engineering students at Dartmouth. And that would never have happened were it not for a casual meeting at Pan Pacific. And if it wasn't raining, if it wasn't there, and it's not like that changed the world, but I'm now able to speak to lots of students before they graduate and give them whatever words of wisdom I offer, whether it's a value or not. Generations from now will determine. But if I am influencing anybody positively, that was the genesis of that was that chance encounter at Pan Pacific. So it is, there's a knock-on effect. The stuff you learn at that show or at that symposium may have a profound effect on technology or business later. It's the genesis of all that, and it is a kind of a fertile breeding ground for ideas and conversation that are deeper than one would normally get in the course of a typical conference. For me, that was
parting
good.
Comments, Mike.
Yeah,
I've got a couple. This is one that you're not allowed to cut. Okay.
Okay. No editing. Okay.
So what I'd like to do is say thank you, Mike, for putting this podcast together. It's a great service to the Pan Pacific, to the SMTA, and to the industry. And I'd like to welcome everyone to come to Hawaii and see what the Pan Pacific is all about, because it truly is an event where you will learn a great deal about the industry, about yourself, and about people from all around the world.
Excellent. Well said. Okay. Well, Chuck Bauer, Keith Bryant. Chuck, thanks for starting up this conference. I appreciate it. Keith, thanks for your contributions to this conference. I appreciate it. And thank you both for being my guest today. And I do look forward to seeing you with the flip-flops and Hawaii shirts and khaki pants and in front of a lectern and then later at the cigar bar and then maybe in the pool. I look forward to seeing everyone. So PanPac is January 30th through February 2nd or 3rd. And information on how to register for PanPac can be found in the show notes. If you're listening to this podcast on your favorite podcast app, then simply look at the show notes and there'll be links to information on how to get more information and register for the Pan-Pacific Microelectronics Symposium. If you're watching this on YouTube, just look straight down where it says Show More, click on the Show More button, and you'll get information as to where to register and find out who's speaking and all of that. All of the logistical information for
One
PanPac.
question for you, Mike, to stick in somewhere.
Sure.
So, Keith, what's the number one rule at the Pan-Pacific?
That's a very simple one, Chuck. No ties.
No ties. Yeah. I remember last year I was speaking.
If you're wearing a tie, it's likely to get chopped off.
One would hope. I was speaking last year. I'm standing at the lectern, and the room we were in was one side of the room was all window, right? And it overlooked the pool. And the particular venue we were at earlier this year also had a dolphin pool with live dolphins jumping and doing their dolphin things. And I remember I'm speaking, and walking in front of the window are like Barbie and Ken in their bikinis and swimsuit. And then behind them are jumping dolphins. And I remember this out-of-body surreal experience. I don't know how I stayed on track. But like, how often in my line of work, how often am I giving a technical talk, watching Barbie and Ken, supermodels and dolphins, in my background? It was completely surreal. And I'm standing in a Hawaiian shirt, shorts, flip-flops. It was the best experience, and certainly cannot be repeated. I'm speaking at SMTAI in November, and I certainly will not see dolphins and supermodels, and I will not be in flip-flops and a Hawaiian shirt. So that's an experience that I cherish, and I'll look forward to once again. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for all the work you do behind the scenes. Thanks for making this such an interesting conference, and I'll look forward to seeing both of you in just a few months at the end of January.
Thanks, Mike.
Fantastic.
Well, once again, that's another episode. Thanks for listening to or watching the Reliability Matters podcast. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Reliability Matters on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or on our newest channel, Amazon Music, or virtually wherever you get your podcasts. A special thanks to Circuit Assembly Magazine's PCB Chat at pcbchat.com and Ascendo Reliability at reliability.fm for syndicating the show. Thanks also for your questions and episode suggestions. Please keep them coming. Send comments and episode suggestions to Mike at mikeconrad.com. Just remember, that's Conrad with a K. And be sure to subscribe to the Reliability Matters podcast on your favorite podcast app. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, click the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when new episodes are released. We release new episodes on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. Once again, thanks for listening or watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and perhaps most importantly, keep doing it right. And I'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.